One fight that I think could have been interesting on the eve of Terrence Crawford beating Sean Porter the way he did was a fight between Terrence Crawford versus prime Terrence Crawford versus prime Pacquiao. Obviously there was talks about Pacquiao fighting Crawford quite a few times actually, and I think the rumor was, what I heard in the rumor mill, I don't know if this is true, is that Freddie Roach, after he saw the way Terrence Crawford completely destroyed Victor Postol, he purposely told Pacquiao to allegedly outprice himself for the fight, so price himself out. So I think Pacquiao demanded 20 million for that fight, and obviously no disrespect to Crawford, but Crawford is not a big enough draw to generate 20 million for Bob Arum to validate a 20 million pound purse for a Crawford fight. So the common consensus was that Pacquiao priced himself out of that fight because at that time Pacquiao was at the tail end of his career. Obviously from that point on he did have a great victory against Broner and Furman and all these other great fighters, but at that point he clearly wasn't in his prime, while Crawford was looking exceptional. I mean, he just beat Victor Postol, who's undefeated, who was coming off a win against Lucas Matisse. So the common consensus was that Freddie Roach purposely told Pacquiao to price himself out of that fight because there's a very strong chance that he would not have won that fight. But from my perspective, I just think it's clear to see that if they weren't both to fight each other when they're in their prime. So I'll talk about Pacquiao when he was going through his welterweight run, when he was destroying Cotto, Hatton, Margarito. He was beating all these top fighters, Clottey, Oscar De La Hoya, knocking out Ricky Hatton. That version of Pacquiao versus the Crawford that we see now, who's on this 11 fight knockout streak. He's knocked out 11 of his last 12 opponents. If they both were to fight each other, who would have won? I think it's a very, very, very close fight. The thing is, Pacquiao, he does tend to fight one way, which is to swarm you. He likes to literally put pressure on you and throw as many punches as he can on you, while you got Crawford, who's a bit more versatile. He can fight in different ways. So I think technically speaking, Crawford is technically a lot better than Pacquiao is. But Pacquiao in his prime, when he was at welterweight, before he got knocked out by Marquez, was an athletic phenom. Like, his hand speed, his power. I mean, in terms of his physical advantages, I think his physical advantages far exuded Crawford's. So from that perspective, if you look at it, Crawford had all the technical ability, while Pacquiao's got all the physical advantages. So from that perspective, who actually wins that fight? My head is saying Crawford because of the fact that technical ability does count for something, but at the same time, Pacquiao at that point was an absolute phenom. He was like a once in a lifetime type ATG type fighter. Like he was like you could have put him up there with like the Sugar Ray Leonards of the world, the fucking Thomas Hearns of the world. I'm not saying he's as good as these fighters, but in terms of how good he was, like, I think he would have been competitive with any of them in his prime. I think he would have given any of them a good fight and gave them a good run for their money, including Floyd Mayweather. There's a reason why Floyd Mayweather ducked him for 5 years, is because at that time Pacquiao was an absolute animal. So from that perspective, even though my head is saying Crawford, I think I'm gonna go with Pacquiao to win. I don't think I think there's a chance that he could hurt him, because Gamboa did the same thing, and Gamboa is another fighter who's smaller than Crawford, but who is like physically quite gifted and athletic the way Pacquiao was. And if they were to fight each other, I think it would have been fun to see who would win that fight. But yeah, it's crazy to see it. It's crazy to see. There was a chance where they could have fought, and I think if it's Pacquiao past his prime, then I think Crawford beats him quite convincingly. I think if the allegations were true, I'm not saying they were, but if they were true, then Pacquiao was pretty smart to price himself out of a fight with Crawford, because Crawford right now is on a bit of a tear. He's an absolute animal. But the fact is, Pacquiao was a little bit over his prime. This was the Pacquiao that was coming off losses against Jeff Horn and Obviously got knocked out by Marquez, and he was still a world-class elite fighter, don't get it twisted, but he wasn't what he was when he was in his prime. So yeah, just from that perspective, I think it's fair to say that I think Pacquiao in his prime would have probably beaten Crawford, but I think it'll be a very, very, very close fight. I just think at that point, in terms of his speed, his athleticism, his southpaw angle, it would have been an interesting fight. I don't think it would have been a very difficult fight to score as well. But obviously Crawford has the ability to be versatile and change his style depending on who he fights, so it would have been a very interesting fight to watch. But I think I'm going to slightly go with Pacquiao. I think Pacquiao just had the athletic gifts to make that fight a very, 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 very tough fight for Crawford. So yeah, that's just my opinion. Tell me your opinion. Who do you think would have won between Crawford versus Pacquiao if they both would have fought in their prime? I mean, who would you have put your money on to beat who? So it's a very, very close, tantalizing fight, but at that time it's hard to tell like who would have won that fight. But yeah, that's just my opinion. Tell me your opinion below, and like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace out.